On this episode, we're talking about small think. Hey everybody, this is The Quarter Show. We're talking about small think on this show, and you know, it's irritating and it's insidious and it's all over the place. And I tell you, we were dealing with a company recently. It was a prospect company, and they'd been around for, I think it was like some time. I don't forget the exact
decades.
Decades, and I don't recall the exact time frame, but and I'm not going to name names, but the revenue of where they're currently at is very small for the amount of time that they've been around, and maybe they want to keep it that way. And I don't know. I don't pretend to know everything about that company, but here's what I do know. I know that small think is paralyzing, right? I know that people sometimes don't even realize that they're thinking small, right? They don't even recognize how small they're thinking, and the way they're thinking is the very thing that's stifling the organization, that's stifling the sales, that's suffocating the group, and it's very hard to grow out of it. One of the very first steps to growth is thinking big. And does that sound a little cliche? Sure, but it's very, very, very true and relevant. And you know, often the companies they're thinking so small that you can't really get anything done. And so the problem they're trying to solve is a very small problem. It's if we can just get here, if we're doing this, it's the small think starts creating a small strategy and a small sell strategy, and next thing you know, it's like you see it sometimes with a sales rep or something like that, and the new sales rep, and they're selling like everything on their lineup is tiny, right? Because their think is tiny, right? Their think is small. And you know, I was talking to one of my top guys, in fact, this week or last week, I guess it was. This week, I don't know, they blend together. But we were talking on this very topic, and we were saying, you know, he was going over his quarterly numbers and where we're at and what we're working on, and you know, one of the numbers that came out was that he was working on was $500,000. He's working on a specific target for $500,000, and you know, and that's great, and it's a decent number, but you know, you have to dramatically solve a bigger problem. You have to, you know, in order to get there, you have to dramatically increase the think. You know, so you know, we were talking about not solving $500,000 problem, solve a $1.5 million problem, right? And the $1.5 million problem is a much bigger problem to solve, and will make it a lot easier to, let's say, get to the $500,000 situation. If you're trying to solve a $1.5 million problem, it completely changes the game for the $500,000 problem, right? And often our thinking, unfortunately, I think it's too small, and I think a lot of people are challenged with it. Just both entrepreneur, people in sales, people in business, it's just too small. They're looking at too narrow a problem. And one thing I've always admired about Elon Musk as a person, I know he gets a lot of media coverage these days and things like that, and you hear about him a lot. And one of the things I like about him is that his think is so enormous. The way, whether he's knowingly doing it or he's natively doing that, or like that's just how he's rigged or whatever, but usually the way, if you really look at the problems he's trying to solve, they're usually at scale. They're usually so enormous. You know, he's looking at, well, how can I, let's say, get an electric car, you know, by this many millions units, or globally accomplish this or whatever. But when you kind of dig in and you look at the problems he's trying to solve, they're generally enormous, and they're at an enormous scale. He's not saying, let's just get into this market sector and accomplish this. He's trying to solve typically a global problem, like an all-encompassing problem. Or going to Mars, or you know, things he's doing with solar or whatever. But usually it's quite large in terms of the think. The think is quite large, and then of course you get a lot of admiration, and people, you know, have a lot of admiration for Elon Musk and for what he's doing and things like that. But I think a lot of people don't realize that it's just the think is so huge that it forces you to solve big problems and come up with big solutions and do big things. And a lot of the time, all you have to do is change people's minds and change the way people are thinking internally and culturally at the company to get them to start saying, well, just shift from this small think that they're currently looking at, and and sort of challenge people to think much, 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 much bigger. And it can be uncomfortable and awkward for a lot of people when they initially think it. It's hard for them to sort of like make it real or really own that target. But you have to really force that in.
There's almost no target that I can set for the week that Rob will accept.
Yeah.
This is what's your target for the week. I say, well, it's blah, blah, blah. He's like, too small. Right? I could throw out almost any kind of number. He's like, no, it's not the right one. Right? But the point is really this. I can throw out a number that would be very good for me to get. And let's say we come to an agreement. I say, my target for this week is X, and he goes, that sounds great. Now how are you going to get there? And you have to get there by planning about 5 times bigger than that.
Yeah.
Like the number of proposals that I have to send out, the dollar value of the number of proposals I have to send out, following good discovery calls and really helpful proposals has to be way bigger than the number I want to hit. So when you think about, you can take this at micro level or macro level or different things like that, but when you're planning out your targets and the size you're going to think, now I've heard this kind of thing too. This is a very conservative, reserved approach. It's a very reserved approach. We want to grow 30% this year. And so you set that as a thing, right? If you don't, and this is leaning towards the area of magic and weirdness and just stupid stuff. It's not meant that way. That if you say we're going to hit 30% growth, you should say instead 30% is our minimum acceptable growth.
Yeah.
Don't set ceilings. Don't sit there. I'm going to make $50,000 this week. Why not, like my target is 50 and I'm going for much bigger, right? Like you have to be thinking in terms of something bigger and then start to plan for that thing. So if you're, and you can think of it in many different ways, but if your target is 30% growth for the year, well, you had better be going for like 90% growth or 100%.
Yeah, and
plan it.
And plan it and solve that problem. Like work your way back, like authentically, not just like, oh, we're gonna do this. It's like, solve that problem.
Yeah, and if you're in marketing and you're post and you see yourself connected to revenue and your product for the year is so much groundswell and so much traction and so many people reaching that the sales numbers then reach a certain point, then you have to start thinking, what do I have to do? My salespeople are going to perform the way they perform. Let's look at their track record. Let's look at the stats. Let's look at the way it's gone. Okay, with this amount of traction, they've achieved this amount of growth.
Yeah.
And yes, things can start to get exponential, but you really have to start looking, what has happened, how has it gone, and what does that mean I have to do? And if you really take that target seriously, then you're going to go to your CEOs, you're going to go to your CFOs, and you're going to be like, this is the budget I need.
This is the spend.
I need, we're not going to go anywhere else.
You don't work from budget. Well, I have this much. What can I make with it?
Well, just go to Richter and have them make 6 viral videos for us. Come on. That's not how growth is made.
It's not. And it's actually too small think. You actually have to, first and foremost, solve the problem from a scale, from big think, from scale, and work your way backward from there and think, okay, what will it take? And then you'll have an idea of, let's say, budget, or let's say other thing, or like what you need to do in order to pull that off, and then you have an accurate picture. But if you're like, well, here's X budget, I got to try and make this work and stretch every dollar. That's, again, small think. That's not actually tackling a problem at scale or big think problem that you're trying to solve. It's really just trying to be frugal with a certain number of budget to accomplish a certain number, which is just it just stagnates the company. It doesn't do anything in terms of real growth. It has a little effect, but not a big effect. And 9 times out of 10, when you talk to most companies, most people, we're all in this for growth, right? We're all trying to do something, typically. Some companies aren't. Some companies are trying to stay the same, which,
if you're trying to stay the same, that means you're working for a paycheck. If you're staying the same, that's straight up money motivation. And I tell you what, eventually you're going to shrink.
And the truth is, it doesn't work. There's only two rules, right? It's like you're contracting or you're expanding. So the truth is, there actually is no the same. So you actually are on this sort of contraction trail.
You're violating the laws of the physical universe.
Yeah, you really are. You really
are. Not going to work out for you.
It just doesn't work that way. But 9 times out of 10, most companies are trying to scale. They're trying to grow, even if they're Apple. They're trying to grow. Even if they're doing 200 billion, it's like they're trying to do 300 billion.
Yep.
I mean, that's what we do.
And you take a look at Amazon, and it's not that any company should live on credit or something like that, but you've talked about Amazon before. They're not necessarily in the black, right?
No, as far as I know right now. I mean, not profitable.
Right, because their goal is world domination.
Yeah, it's like they're taking tiny margin, but their think is enormous.
They want to take over everything.
Right, their think is enormous.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos' think is enormous, and any of those major leaders, their think is enormous.
So his target is not like, let's make sure we have X millions or X 1.5 billion in the bank, and let's never, because we can't give you too much to expand.
Yeah.
His whole thing is, we're going to expand so much that we are so unkillable, and we're going to take over the.
We've completely taken over this market.
Like
the entire.
It's over.
The entire market.
We're going to start getting sued for monopoly in a little bit. Is what's going to start happening.
That's actually goals.
That's a goal.
Becoming a monopoly.
Number of lawsuits regarding monopolization. We're upstat. We've got 5 new lawsuits, guys. It's great.
But it is, and you run into that a lot with a lot of companies, and I try and stay away from it because I think it's a total plague, is to have small think. You don't want to have small think with your sales team. You don't want to have small think with your management of the sales team. You don't want to have small think with, you as an entrepreneur or you as an organization. You really have to look at a target and really go, like, what does big think mean? What are we trying to do? How do we get to scale? And how do we solve that big problem? And if you think, doing 500,000 or 2 million or 3 million or whatever that number is for you, if you think that's a good number or decent, then I would challenge you to say, fine, so what is the big think number or the big think item or goal that you need to write down, and then solve that problem and work your way backwards, and so if you're a $10 million company, that number might be 100 million, it might be 200 million, it might be a certain objective, it might be acquiring your biggest competitor, it might be something that makes your stomach turn a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Rob set goals. Every year he sets goals and targets. I don't know that we've made one. But we've always made some previous years one, because he goes, here's where we're going this year, right? Because you have to work that way. If you don't, you're going to you will solve a problem that's much, much smaller, or you won't quite make it to solving that small problem.
You'll attain it, but the problem was so damn small that, like, and the things, I don't feel bad about that. If we miss a target,
we make our short run targets a lot. Rob has some seriously big things.
Yeah, we make tactical targets.
We push.
But the truth is, even I think my think is too small half the time. And we hit a lot of tactical targets, but also there's big, huge, lofty targets. I think Jim Collins does a good job talking about in his book. I guess, what is that? I have to pull up that book. I forget which book he talks about. Good to Great, one of those books. Anyway, he's got some great books. There's like 4 or 5 books I've read from him, and he talks about this whole idea of like that big, hairy, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. And I think that's a really relevant thing. It dovetails in with big think, but you can solve so much as a sales team, or in marketing, or just organizationally, with just literally correcting the think internally, and ensuring that everybody's thinking big, and nobody has this sort of small think attitude about what they're doing or what their objectives are, and then again, not just the think, but solving it, like actually taking the time to solve that problem. If Elon Musk is trying to go to Mars, it's like, okay, we're going to go to Mars. Big think, insane target, huge, right?
Yep.
I mean, who's doing that? Yeah. We're gonna have it, like literally.
The Richter's goals are secret. Our BHAGs
are secret, by the way.
Our strategic goals, fine, you can ask us about those.
We can't.
No, we're not going to release the big ones because you wouldn't believe it anyway.
You doubt us.
You'd be like, they're crazy. So those goals are set, and they're not set as pie in the sky. They're set as, this is for real, and now we're going to set the strategy and get us there bit by bit, piece by piece, and that's what makes your people hungry. Yeah. And if you set targets that make them really want to go after it and achieve certain things, and you reward them for doing so along the way, then you're going to create a freaking great team, and you're not going to think small.
And it gives everybody a good game. It gives everybody a good game and a good sort of objective to go after, and not this sort of small game that they're playing. Right. Everybody can get behind the big thing, and it's exciting, it's challenging, it pushes people's limits, it pushes people's potential. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
So there you go. think big, really get behind it, really work out how to solve the bigger problem, not the smaller problem, and challenge everybody and really knock out any small thing. I mean, we're going into summer here as well, actually actively in summer, July and August. Nothing is more important throughout July and August than to crush the big thing, push everybody, get people where they're kind of, you know, lackadaisical and on vacation mode and things like that. It's okay to go on vacation, but keep the engine running and keep pushing through, and that's how you're going to win through summer as well. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the show right there, and you can follow us on Twitter at The Quarter Show, and we will have more coming at you soon. Thanks.